Okay, welcome everybody to the October 23rd LF Decentralized Trust Technical Advisory Council meeting. I think most of us have been on the call before, but just a reminder, there are two things that we have to abide by. The first is our antitrust policy. So we need to be aware of and not participate in any activities that are prohibited under any of the antitrust and competition laws across the world. The second thing that we have to abide by is our code of conduct. While everybody is welcome here, we do need to be respectful of others on the call, their opinions and ideas, and we should all get along fine. And if you do need the text for the full code of conduct, please do see the link in the meeting agenda. For announcements today, we have the LF Decentralized Trust Dev Weekly Developer Newsletter that goes out each Friday. If you do have anything that you would like to include in that newsletter, please do leave a comment for consideration on the link here in the agenda. The second announcement is a reminder that the nomination period for the 2026 TAC term has begun. It does end October 31st, which is just over a week away, and it does end at the end of day Pacific time. There is a mechanism to determine if you're eligible, and that site should be updated. And if you are eligible, please do file an issue on GitHub with your nomination statement. There is one statement already there from this year that you can see as a reference if you are interested in seeing what others might have to say already. For the next announcement that we have, November 12th, Wednesday, at 8 a.m. Pacific time, there is a workshop on cross-network interop with Hyperledger Cacti. There is a registration link here in the agenda if you are interested in registering for that workshop. The next announcement that we have is that the Maintainer Days registration is now open, and there is a registration link also in the agenda that you can use to register. The Maintainers Day event is free for all attendees, and the registration will also include a registration for the LFDT Member Summit that is happening immediately after for the maintainers that are attending Maintainer Days. So even if you're not part of that LFDT member company who is part of the LF Decentralized Trust, then you can still attend Member Summit if you are a maintainer attending Maintainer Days. And then the last announcement, I just added the reminder that we did have those two pull requests that we discussed last week in our meeting. So if you do have any updates to those, please do leave your comments so that we can get those updated and bring up in a future meeting. Any other announcements that anybody has or would like to make today? Okay, so we'll move on to our quarterly reports. We currently have 3 quarterly reports in the list to review. That would be the Web3J Q3 report. I believe we're still waiting on the maintainers to respond to some comments there. We also have the Cacti Q4 and the Fabric Q4 reports that have come in and are waiting to be reviewed. As of this morning, I think only one of those had any reviews on them, and it was only a single review. So please do review those 2 reports when you have time to take a look at them. For overdue reports, we have a number of overdue reports. I did see, Arun, you were reaching out to a few of those this week already, but please do, if you haven't reached out to all of them, reach out to the rest of them and let them know that they do have some reports that are overdue.
Okay.
And then for upcoming reports, we have 2 that are due today. One that we'll probably not get because it is a dormant project, but still leaving it on the list just so we keep track of that. And then the other one, which is due in 2 weeks' time, is the Stolen Q4 report. Any questions on the reports before we move on to the discussion item for today? Okay, if not, then our discussion item for today is the project proposal to move Paladin to incubation. So Matthew, you did submit this. Would you like to take us through the proposal?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, I see you've got it, pulled up there. The PR has been open probably for nearly a week, I think. Several people from Kaleido, particularly from who have worked on or been instrumental in the development of Paladin and Zito, have joined the call. So we have Peter Broadhurst. Some of you may be familiar with Peter from his involvement with Firefly, and one of the founders of Kaleido, Jim Zhang. Similarly, on both counts, and has been heavily involved in the Zito side of the Paladin project, and Andrew Richardson, who has been doing a lot of work on both Firefly and Paladin over the last couple of years. And just to give I'm looking for you, Tracy, for a little bit of guidance as to how to kind of go through the proposal. But I was going to suggest maybe I give a quick 5-minute recap of Paladin and why we're bringing this proposal forward. Maybe perhaps open it to some on the Paladin Kaleido side who may want to chip in with some comments and provide some more detail in areas, and then perhaps open it for questions. Is that a good way to go about it, Tracy?
Sounds like a great approach.
Great, thank you. And Peter, Andrew, Jim, Enrique, do feel free to chip in as I go through if you think that there are things that I've not covered sufficiently. So to give a very high level overview for those who aren't familiar with Paladin, Paladin provides a programmable privacy framework for EVM blockchains, and it provides out of the box both two predefined token formats, which we can talk about more in a moment, notarized tokens and zero-knowledge tokens, and a programmable privacy domain, which is called Pente. And the intent of Paladin is to solve the problem of how you achieve privacy on both permissioned and public blockchains. More specifically, how you can deploy tokens and have programmability of those tokens, do atomic swaps, DVP-like processes, with the right level of privacy for your business environment. Paladin, for a bit more background on where Paladin sits in the LFDT currently, Paladin is an LFDT lab, and this proposal is actually referring to two labs: the Paladin lab as it currently stands, and also the Zito lab, which was created before the switch over to LFDT. So that's a Hyperledger lab. And this proposal includes bringing those two labs together under one LFDT project banner, albeit keeping their repositories, their code bases separated. And the intent is really to take Paladin to the next step along its journey to maturity, to awareness, to a broader audience, to hopefully a growing kind of community of maintainers and developers. And as others I'm sure we'll talk about when we get into the detail, Paladin is very pluggable, and some of the concepts that are described here about zero-knowledge tokens and notarized tokens and EVM smart contracts that are within a privacy group, those are all pluggable, and we encourage people to look at Paladin as a framework into which they can add their own privacy mechanisms. It's probably worth kind of covering from some of the aspects of the proposal template for LFDT that pretty much everyone I've named so far has been heavily active in a number of LFDT projects. So they're very familiar with both open source development and the LFDT/Hyperledger framework that those other projects fall under. Our intent is that Paladin will have its first major release in the very near future, and this proposal somewhat aligns with that process. Now, I'm just going to pause there for a second. I've covered a little bit of that context that Tracy's showing about the two independent labs at the moment, and the fact that this is intended to bring them together. I don't know if you want to scroll down a little further through the proposal, Tracy. Maybe I'll just stop you as we go. There's a bit in here about just the fundamental need in the EVM space for privacy. That's a kind of an absolute given now in the blockchain space, and particularly in the EVM space. And just to kind of give a very high level of the solution, Paladin acts as I guess an off-chain management transaction management component to a base ledger of some sort, where an example base ledger might be a permissioned Besu chain, or another really good example might be a level 1 chain like Ethereum, or a level 2 chain like Linear. It supports fully supports EVM compatible smart contracts being deployed into privacy groups. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it supports deploying out of the box using its predefined token formats, both notarized tokens, where you have a notary as a party who is party to all transactions and potentially involved in all transactions and has visibility of them, but also a zero knowledge based token with varying degrees of anonymity and confidentiality based on the needs you have, the gas costs you're willing to consume, and so on. And if people have questions specifically about the Zito and the zero knowledge token side of Paladin, as I said, Jim Zhang is on the call and can go into much more detail about that. Interestingly, Paladin actually brings in part of Besu in its actual runtime. So if you keep going down a little, I think the effort and resources section just talks a little bit about some of the technologies. So Paladin is primarily written in Golang, but as I said, it pulls in substantial libraries from Besu in order to provide EVM smart contract execution and also EVM state management. So there is a reasonable amount of Java. The privacy group domain, as we call it, called Pente, is written in Java, and that integrates with Besu. So Besu, as a robust, tried and tested technology for EVM execution and state, we actually reused that existing LFDT project inside Paladin in order to run smart contracts and maintain state of smart contracts. So it's quite a complex project. There are some quite complex concepts involved in Paladin. And as I said, others on the call, I'm sure, can go into detail on those if people would like to kind of explore some of those further. I guess one more minute, and then I think I'll probably stop talking. We've been working towards Paladin having quite a good getting started experience already. So both the GitHub repo and the Paladin documentation has really clear getting started guides for developers, getting started tutorials for users, and our documentation maturity is an area we've been focusing on recently as we move towards a V1 release. So Paladin's in a pretty good state now for other maintainers, other contributors to come to the project and start contributing to it. And from a user point of view, someone coming to Paladin to use it and understand what it offers, understand its architecture and where it fits in the rest of the EVM landscape. The Paladin docs that I've included some links to are pretty mature now, and they give a really good overview of a lot of those areas that people would expect of an incubating LFDT project. So I'm gonna pause there. I didn't want to go too far down any one avenue. I think maybe just before we invite questions, I'll just invite anyone from the Paladin or Zito development side. So Peter, Andrew, Jim, Enrique, is there anything you feel it'd be really useful to highlight that I've kind of perhaps skimmed over at all?
Yeah, and I'd like to stay up there. This is Peter here. I'd like to stay just at the high level for the moment. So why the Linux Foundation? Why does this project fit? And there's a few things I just want to double click on from what Matt said. So the first is really the enterprise needs for privacy. So there are the use of EVM as a programming model for truly shared ledgers is something that's got this great traction, this great momentum in the world, and that's fantastic. But we found, and this actually came a couple of years ago now from a Linux Foundation event for BESU, that there's this real challenge for these projects to get past the experimentation space into real, genuine production, thinking about currencies for the whole of a country, ecosystems for fully regulated securities within a regulatory jurisdiction. To really get those to production, you can't skim over the requirement for privacy. And the needs from an enterprise perspective are quite different from the needs from a purist Web3 perspective. And there wasn't really a project out there at the time that Paladin started that was tackling that head on, that was really thinking about the enterprise needs first. Now, what's really interesting about Paladin is it did not start by thinking about the problem as what we really need is a super clever piece of cryptography which is going to solve privacy. It explicitly did not take that approach. There is lots of clever cryptography approaches like zero knowledge proofs and stuff inside of there, but that is not what you should think of like the Paladin project. Instead, what it said was enterprises, just like with completely open tokens like ERC20s, where they can use their keys, they know how to connect, they know how to integrate, and then users do as well with MetaMask and the like. This world of privacy-enabled smart contracts, it's not only hard to build, but my goodness me, how on earth do you use it? How do you connect to it? How do you integrate with it? How do you write your own smart contracts? How do you create ecosystems where one company produces the token, another company produces the asset, and then a third company maybe is creating the market making in the middle? Well, if you kind of have to build everything inside of one super special, interesting cryptography world, then it's not an ecosystem. It's one organization that's built one clever piece of cryptography, and everyone just has to fit inside of it. So Paladin, while it comes with these great reference implementations, the belief of the Paladin community is that they're actually leading class in their own right. That's not what Paladin is about. Paladin's about proving that those and the things that are going to supersede them in a year's time, the new cryptography that's going to come along, the new engines, the upgraded smart contract language engines, etc. All of these that come along, you can build solutions now that are future-proof, because that's the point of EVM. And it's about bringing that promise, this minimum viable ecosystem promise that's been so amazing for public Web3, bringing that to enterprise in a truly open and modular way. So I said, I waffled for quite a long time, that I'd like bring it back to wider Linux Foundation. And that's because it really is about an open approach to this, which is about if somebody's got a token that they want to bring to Paladin, there's a way to plug it in. It's if you want to build an ecosystem that's open, it's about being able to do that in an enterprise context and build a truly open ecosystem. And we think that that's one of the reasons why it's had so much engagement from so many organizations where, I mean, we're talking probably over 50 large financial institutions that are engaged actively with it right now, because there is this real need to sort of get past this barrier of adoption that exists in enterprise blockchain if we don't solve the privacy problem.
Hey, Jim here. I'd like to jump in with a few more comments on Zito, but before I do that, I see Tracy's hand is up. Tracy, did you want to go first?
No, if there's more to add, please add it, and then I'll ask my questions, because you may actually answer one of the questions that I have, so.
Okay.
I'll let you guys do your thing first, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. Thanks,
Thanks,
Tracy.
Jim.
Yeah, if you scroll all the way back up to the beginning of the document, I like to call out some of the contributions from research from a very talented research team from UC Berkeley and UNC Chapel Hill. So Zito, some of you may have seen the code, but you may not realize that Zito as a domain implementation for Paladin is not just one token. It's a collection of, I think at the current count, 11 tokens that depends on your specific policy needs within the zero knowledge proof. What kind of policy do you need to prove? You pick your token so that you don't have to bear the burden of doing everything in heavy cryptography if you didn't need that kind of additional policies. So one of the implementations I think is likely the first in the world where post-quantum encryption was performed inside a zero-knowledge proofed circuit, so that the ciphertext that results from that is guaranteed to be decipherable by the receiver, in this case, a auditor. So that was a collaboration with this research team in Berkeley and UNC. In fact, Hart himself, in his personal time when he's not traveling, was also involved in this effort. So just want to call this out, and very exciting to hear about your thoughts.
So Tracy, I think that's the team's shared lots of information there. So I'd love to move to the questions.
Okay, sounds great. So I actually have three questions. We'll take them one by one, but the first question I have is around, are there currently any adopters for Paladin in Zito that are using the projects as they exist today? Or is that one of the things that is hoped to be kind of gotten, if you will, from moving to an incubation type stage?
Adoption is definitely actually very high on Paladin. Lots of independent adoption, not even just the Kaleido as sort of instigators of the project are directly involved in. There are very large organizations, I'm afraid I'm not sure I'm actually able to mention them by name, but if you were to look at recent announcements in the industry, when people are talking about EVM and privacy together, talking about that in the context of public chains, for example, or large financial institutions, like thinking about how to work with public chains, large international institutions working together to build new forms of currency. You'll be very likely to find somewhere in that mix that Paladin is involved. It wasn't. It was like I personally have been directly working with dozens of financial institutions which are engaging directly with Paladin. So there was a lot of traction on that side, and that's not actually really the reason for the incubation push. Actually, the reason is that these are not toy projects. These are projects that want to get aggressively to production, real, genuine production. Actually, that means that Paladin from the beginning has been very enterprise focused. So quality has been very much a focus of Paladin, but there's a phase of hardening, like a V1 journey that a project needs to go on. Matt hasn't talked about it, but there's like a whole internal brain engine upgrade happening at the moment. There's that kind of style of engineering is where Paladin is up to. It's proven its value. It's got to work fast at scale. It's got to be able to be relied upon for high value, real financial transactions. And that means it needs that level of scrutiny that comes with with the incubating status, and it needs the level of sort of focus on hardening that comes from bringing something from a prove it has fit stage to really prove it can scale and be used at the next phase. Was that helpful, Tracy, in terms of the why for the incubating phase?
Yeah, definitely. And just a follow-on question to the adopters. Do you foresee any of those adopters that are currently working with the Paladin becoming future maintainers? Is there anybody on track for that? Is there anybody thinking about that? Just curious as to how you see that kind of playing out.
That's a really great question. Maybe I'll start, and Jim and Matt might chime in as well. Yes, we do. I think there's a journey there for any organization working with this, that what they care about, I think quite correctly, is their use case. First, the smart contracts, the ecosystem, and developing. And the journey to dedicating the level of real protocol expertise it takes to engage with a sophisticated runtime that's, treats something like Besu as a small module, one of like 50 inside of the engine. It is like real. It's hardcore engineering to contribute to the core of Paladin. In terms of are these adopters looking at stumping that up? Yes, we're definitely having conversations with lots of them that are. Again, I don't feel the confidence to name names here of the specific organizations that I'm thinking of, but yes, I do believe that there are real organizations that are thinking about the right way to do that. And I think there's kind of three ways that they might. One is around how do you extend it with new reference plugins for token economies. So if you think of a privacy-preserving stablecoin being launched onto the mainnet, but wants to get access to enterprise adoption, you need a privacy-preserving wallet. So I think that that's somewhere where we expect to see adoption turn into contribution through adding in modules. We've talked about Zito being a sort of homegrown module inside of Paladin. Well, what about a module completely outside of there that's, I don't know, fully homomorphic encryption, or a very Web3 focused, DeFi focused rather than enterprise focused token model. A railgun, for example, was an interesting question from railgun in one of the presentations on Paladin some time back. You think about that as one route in. I think we'll see contribution. Second is packaging and deployment and rollouts. That's an area where we may see additional parties coming in. I think a third is chains that want to come to enterprise. And here we are. I actually would think they would be very happy for me to mention them, as they're a sort of a friend of Kaleido and a great friend of the Linux Foundation. I know Consensus and the Linear team have been working a lot with Paladin. So that's an area where we may well see contribution, because making sure Paladin works seamlessly with an L2 ecosystem, you can see the benefits there. And that extends a little bit more to one maybe I'm less confident in talking about, of an ecosystem that maybe is like, well, just a minute, not on the token side, but on the EVM side. We talked about, it's called Pente, the next generation of Tessera. That is just one of the modules inside of Paladin, and that lets you write EVM smart contracts that run inside of Besu. When you think about a zero knowledge proof rollup toolkit that's running L2s, well, they also care about enterprise, and they also care about privacy. You might see them wanting to put modules into Paladin to say, oh, instead of running as the Besu Pente implementation does, just signature collection, just like Tesla are used to, signature collection to verify we've agreed on the smart contract logic. What about zero knowledge proof rollups as a way to run an EVM inside of Paladin? Well, that also fits inside of Paladin. So there's lots of routes in for sort of coming and doing it. And I think where we'll see that really happen is where the adoption meets the use cases. That was a long answer, Tracy, but lots of different directions where we expect to see that corner getting turned, and we expect to see the move to incubation actually be a real signal that the project's ready to receive that.
I love the answer, Peter. I think it's great. And I think the places that you called out are probably good things to have somewhere out front for people who might be new to the project, right? Coming in and having a look and say, oh, this is some place that I might be able to contribute. Those examples were great examples of places that people might, really find some interest in digging in and putting some thought to contributing. So great answer.
Oh, I love the suggestion. Matt, Gemini, and Andrew will take that away and consider that an urgent priority in terms of the next sort of couple of weeks, and making sure that we sort of bump up some of that material. There are quite a few different APIs, as you can imagine, on Paladin. Some of them are about using Paladin, and we've got lots of really good documentation on that. Some of them are about extending and adding modules into Paladin, and there's some great diagrams, and there's a lot of internal like gRPC interface comments. There isn't quite yet I want to build the next Zito, I want to build the next Pente. How do I do that? And I think that's an area we could actually take a real concrete action over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay. If somebody else does have a question, please raise your hand because I have two more that I'd like to ask, and I don't want to monopolize the time, but since I don't see any other hands, I'm going to continue. My next question is around, you mentioned, Peter, in your discussion at the beginning, a comment that made me think about, it was at the beginning when we put this together, there was nothing else like this out there. Is there now anything starting or in progress that is like this type of project in the overall Ethereum ecosystem that maybe the team might want to reach out to and see about having them contribute to Paladin rather than start their own new thing?
Yeah, so that's a great point. Maybe I'll start this and I'll hand over to Matt or Jim to talk a little bit more. So there's a lot of very active conversations happening with the Ethereum Foundation actually at the moment, and other organizations in the EVM space like EA, who are all thinking, well, just a minute, we've kind of solved scale. Privacy is the next big barrier to adoption of this whole great new Web3 world that we've got started on here, particularly for the EVM and Ethereum sort of place in the world. And there are some other projects that have popped up. There's a particular one which Matt or Jen will help me remember the name of, which is like a browser native version of this, like a much more, sorry,
Kohaku.
And that's kind of saying, if you imagine end user Web3 adoption of privacy technologies, people are used to a world where it's just MetaMask, it just fits into my mobile, it fits into my web browser, and I want to be able to plug in all these privacy technologies. And that's coming in at a very sort of fully decentralized end user Web3 in way to this. And Paladin's coming in at it a little bit more from we're an enterprise, we know we're going to need an enterprise grade engine at the boundary of organization. We've probably got 100,000 customers that are going to trust us to be their gateway to this Web3 world. I need an engine that sits there, and maybe I'm going to be issuing these tokens, not just helping people hold them and do custody of them. I'm going to be issuing them as a large financial institution. So coming at the same problem from two different ends, I think is the case. Then there are tens and tens and tens of projects popping up, which are still the approach of I've got a new shiny way to do privacy. Those are popping up all the time, and there still seems to be a little bit of a gap that we hope the incubation phase and also the engagement with the EF can help with, of how do those creators of tokens, those creators of privacy, like make themselves pluggable to enterprise and wallets, and where can Paladin fit in with that? And we actually have a journey towards proposing an EIP standard, which is happening in that space, to try and make, like ERC20 said, look, here's a very simple standard that be the boundary of all your tokens, that lets them interoperate together, have atomic transactions across them, program across them. How about there's maybe an EIP standard that's a similar sort of approach that could be used for interoperability between privacy tokens. And that's an area where we're working hard behind the scenes to get it right. And where right means it's the right shape to engage with the community properly. So we're talking to the EF about it, but it's not quite the shape yet to be proposed. And I don't know if Matt or Jim want to talk a little bit more about the journey there and where we are on this on that journey.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement for sure. We're quite proud that we sort of were starting to tackle privacy ahead of anybody else, because since we live in the enterprise world, privacy is front and center. So now the whole Web3 ecosystem are all focused, a lot of talents on privacy, and a lot of them bring a lens of, I'm going to use smart cryptography to solve this, versus there are practical ways to do this too. So Paladin is trying to not be opinionated, and is trying to accommodate all these different approaches. And at the end of the day, Paladin is a framework that'll continue to grow. So we're very excited to see how Paladin will help with the roadmap.
All right, thank you. And then my last question is very different than my other questions. The last question is around the CIRCOM library that Zato is using. Is that the one that is LGPL licensed, and what kind of implications does that have for bringing something to LFDT?
Yeah, that's a good question. So CIRCOM, I've been talking with the founders of IDEN3, professor in the university in Spain, about the licensing. So he personally said there's no problem of using CIRCOM, which is sort of a generation library. It's kind of a tool, so that you use it to generate the runtime assembly. And he said many teams have taken this approach to say that the GPL licensed code should continue to have GPL, but the generated code, running those in enterprise setting, there's no problem with this usage pattern. At the same time, we're also talking with them about changing the code base to Apache 2 to be more friendly to enterprise adoption. And they're pretty acceptive to this suggestion. Some of the libraries have already been converted to Apache 2, but not all.
Just a note, and I wonder if Hart had any other comments on this one, because this was a very hot topic. Zito was the first thing to be open sourced as part of the Paladin journey. Actually went slightly ahead of the original Paladin lab submission, because getting zero knowledge proofs right is so important. You wanted to be out there in the world as early as possible. So a lot of these conversations happened then. I don't know if Hart, you had any comments from your recollection of how we went through that conversation at the time.
Are you referring to the CIRCOM conversation, Peter?
Yeah, CIRCOM and the LGPL.
My recollection is this falls under the linking exception, right?
Yeah, very much so. I think that was what Jim was saying from the conversations with the maintainers of Circum itself was that they see it that way. Within Circum, it's fully covered by the linking, the dynamic linking provision in LGPL. I guess I was more meaning in terms of it's still unusual for LFDT to accepting code that has a touch with LGPL, and whether there's any more conversation you feel needed on that as part of the move into incubation status, or maybe that's an offline thing to see, and maybe have a chat with Tracy about whether the analysis that was done as part of the lab, it just carries forward to the incubation phase, or we need to sort of redo some of that for the incubation phase.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, Hart, it's more a question of, is there going to be any problems Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust and the greater Linux Foundation in bringing this project to incubation if we are using a library that has the LGPL. And if it's, if there's an exception based on linking, then it's probably not a problem, but I just want to make sure no issues before we go forward and have a vote or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I don't think there should be any issues. Obviously not a lawyer.
Sure, I'm not either.
I think we need to document this. But generally speaking, if we have in correspondence that the authors have said it's a linking exception, we're probably fine. We have taken projects into incubation that inadvertently have bad license dependencies that we've had to fix out later. So this one is not especially worrisome for me. And it's not the code. Sorry, the code is not, the CIRCOM code is not going in LFDT.
Correct.
So it's a purely external dependency.
Okay, great.
Just one note, and maybe this is something that might get in the docs or not. If you were an enterprise coming to this project, and as an enterprise you were worried about this aspect at all, you would be able to use the project and most of the features of it without needing this, because the only usage is inside of an optional module. You obviously couldn't experiment with zero knowledge proofs with the project, but you could experiment with privacy as a whole and all of the other approaches, and the issuer backed tokens approach, and the privacy groups, and the use of BESU, ephemeral EVMs, and all of that. You could do all of that, and you could choose then, if you wanted to use zero knowledge proofs, you could choose to bring your own toolkit and plug in zero knowledge proofs. So it's not like the project is not usable by an organization if they chose themselves to want to use it without Circum at all.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering the questions. I think there is a question from Arun. Did we want to talk about that live here instead of in the chat? Arun?
Thanks, Tracy. So I guess I don't know if you have visibility of the chat. Peter, Arun had a question about key exchange between Paladin nodes. I didn't know if that was something you wanted to touch on briefly, connectivity and key information.
I'd love to, but you're going to have to stop me getting too excited and talking too much about falling too deeply into the well. So I think the short answer is Paladin has two kinds of keys. This is worth noting. Pretty much any good privacy technology has to deal with this problem. It was true for Tessera before and Constellation before that as well. One type of key is like blockchain signing keys. How do I sign transactions? Paladin has very pluggable cryptography there. You can use lots of different types of keys if you want to over time. And it also has really advanced key management built in, pretty enterprise grade key management and pluggable key management built in out of the box. It's quite an advanced feature inside of there. So that's blockchain signing keys, and your key stays private to you in that case. So I'll come to answering the question in a second. So I want to describe that type of key. And the second type of key, which is important to understand, is different, and that's data transmission keys. So if we have private data now, it's not just being exchanged. Everybody on the blockchain is receiving a copy of my data. Only certain parties are going to receive a copy of it. I need to know how to transfer data privately to that party. If I'm not going to encrypt it and store it on chain, because I'm worried about post-quantum cryptography or just a massive load on the chain that all data will cause, I'm going to send it privately to another party. I need to know how to encrypt and transfer it off-chain to that party. So I need the transfer keys for them. So I've got those two different types of keys. Now, in addition to just managing those keys in the runtime, Paladin provides what's called a registry, and this can be an on-chain registry to actually have a smart contract where you say, hey, look, I want to join a private ecosystem with you. I'm going to advertise the public key credentials for transferring me data off-chain, and I'm going to push it onto the blockchain. So you have a blockchain-backed registry, and all of the smart contracts as a starter are provided for you in the project for this. It just works out the box, but you can swap in your own contract for this if you want to manage your ecosystem your own way, to be like, here's a trusted repository of node endpoints, and everyone just uses a blockchain transaction to advertise and rotate their off-chain transmission keys. And once you've done that, if during creation of a transaction, I need to ask some people for signatures from them that are on-chain signing signatures, I know I'm asking the right person because I know through this registry about the right off-chain key to communicate with them. So I can use the off-chain key to ask them a question, know I'm talking to the right party, and then however they do their key management, they do it themselves. And there are what's called logical identifiers for the keys. So they can tell me what logical identifier they're going to use for their key. And they manage the keys themselves. There's a lot of information in there that probably justifies now on its own, but I wonder if that gives you enough to feel like you understand the broad strokes. And I'd be really great maybe to do like some more deep dive sessions. We've done a few of them in the past, but maybe with the incubation phase, it makes sense to sort of kick off a round of a few more deep dive webinar style sessions to sort of share the latest on how some of this stuff works.
Thank you for detailed answer, Peter. That addresses my question. And this is a great project. Thank you for simplifying how privacy can be achieved in enterprise applications.
That's great. Thanks, Owen.
All right. Any other questions that need to be discussed before we think about voting? Yeah, Diane?
Yeah, I'm just asking a few questions in the chat around governance and community building, since we do have a kind of a leaning towards the majority of people being from Colito, sort of a nudge to open up their TSC to other folks and how they might be wanting to do that. And Matthew's answering it in the chat. Matthew, if you want to speak to that a little bit, if you can get perhaps maybe some of these berkeley.edu folks on a TSC or some of your end users on a TSC, that would be optimal. But again, as other folks are saying, I think technically the project is amazing and a good thing. So I'm just curious what your plans are around governance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so absolutely, we'll be looking to explore bringing on possible maintainers from outside Kaleido, as Peter's partly touched on, and certainly the Zito side of things is likely to have a different set of maintainers and code owners to the core of Paladin. We have outlined in the proposal, kind of following through the proposal template, some plans around how we plan to structure comms and things like community calls. I've put some suggestions in there about how we might expand our Discord surface area beyond what we have at the moment, and that we would start running community calls if the project moves to incubating, in line with how incubating projects run. So yeah, certainly I think moving to incubating is a kind of a step on and a step out of the shadows in some respects for projects, and hopefully allows us to bring on maintainers from outside Kaleido, and just get broader community involvement, both at the user level, which can potentially lead to contributions over time, as people get a better understanding for perhaps just a specific area of Paladin, and perhaps they're interested in contributing to a specific part of it without having to necessarily get up to speed with the entire framework. But yeah, we're certainly planning as part of this to grow our kind of our comms and our community outreach kind of side of the project.
Sounds good.
All right, any other questions that anybody has before we get to a vote? All right, sounds like there are no further questions. Would somebody like to motion to accept Paladin/Zito as an incubated project?
I'll raise the motion.
That was Enrique?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Enrique. And a
I'm
second?
very happy to second it. I don't know about if conflict of interest apply here, but I'm very happy to second it.
No,
Okay.
we've over the decade plus, you know, just because you work on the project doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion on its status. So don't worry about that.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah,
Yep.
happy to second it.
Okay, so in the matter before the TAC, which is the acceptance of the Paladin project proposal in incubating state, Marcus, how do you vote? Aye, nay, or abstain?
Aye.
Char,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Enrique,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Rama,
Aye.
Arun,
Aye.
Matthew.
Aye.
Congratulations. The motion passes, and welcome to the fold.
All right, great.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to the proposal and hear a bit about it. We're really excited about the next steps.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for bringing the proposal. And I think unless anybody else has anything that they'd like to bring up, we are at the end of the call. But give me let's just give a moment, make sure there's nothing else anybody would like to bring up. Okay. So then let's go ahead and close out today's meeting. I think next week, unless something else comes up that might distract us from the 2 PRs that we discussed last week, we'll get an update on those PRs and see if we want to merge those in or not. With that, let's go ahead and close today's meeting. Thank you all for joining, and congratulations to the Paladin Zito team.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.